Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we take up issues of national and international importance. Today we're going to talk about Mission LiFE and climate change. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called for people's participation and collective efforts in combating climate change, addressing the World Bank event on Friday on how behavioral change can tackle climate change. Prime Minister Modi said climate change cannot be fought from conference rooms alone, but must be fought at dinner table in every home. He also said that under Mission LiFE, the government's efforts are spread across many domains, such as making local bodies environment friendly, saving water, saving energy, reducing waste, and e-waste, adopting healthy lifestyles as well, adoption of natural farming and promotion of millets. Now, a global call for Mission LiFE, that is lifestyle for environment, was given by Prime Minister Narendra Modi while delivering India's national statement at COP26 held at Glasgow in October-November 2021. Subsequently, Mission LiFE was launched by Prime Minister Modi in October 2022. A recent UN study, Climate Change 2023 Synthesis Report, outlines the many options that can be taken now to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to human-caused climate change. Now, this report also recognizes the interdependence of climate ecosystems, biodiversity, and human societies. So today, we'll try and understand a bit more about this aspect of tackling climate change, that is bringing in behavioral change, making it a mass movement, taking the discussion from the conference rooms or from the studios to the dining rooms as well. And for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. But before I take you to the experts, let's also listen into what the Prime Minister had to say earlier.
It is great to see it becoming a global movement. Friends, Chanakya, a great Indian philosopher, wrote this over 2000 years ago. Small drops of water, when they come together, fill up a pot. Similarly, knowledge, good deeds, or wealth add up gradually. This has a message for us. By itself, each drop of water may not seem much, but when it comes together with many other such drops, it makes an impact. By itself, each good deed for the planet may seem insignificant. But when billions across the world do it together, the impact is huge. We believe that individuals making the right decisions for our planet are key in the battle for our planet. This is the core of Mission LiFE. The seeds of this movement were sown long ago. In 2015, at the United Nations General Assembly, I spoke about the need for behavioral change. Since then, we have come a long way. In October 2022, the UN Secretary General and I had launched Mission LiFE. The preamble of the outcome document of COP27 also speaks about sustainable lifestyle and consumption. And it is wonderful to see that experts in the climate change arena have also adopted this mantra.
There it is. We heard the Prime Minister talking about the collective effort or Mission LiFE there as well. Let's go deeper into all these concepts. And for more on this, as I was saying, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Urmi Goswami is with us here, senior journalist, keeps a close watch on all issues related to environment and climate change. We're also joined by Dr. Amit Kumar Mishra, from the School of Environmental Sciences in JNU. Welcome both of you to Sansad TV studios. We're also joined by a few more guests. Minal Pathak, Senior Scientist, IPCC, is with us. Mr. Pawan Mulukutla is also with us, Director, Electric Mobility and Sustainable Cities with WRI India. And we also have Mr. Anil Kumar, Principal of DPS Faridabad, joining us. Welcome, all of you as well, to Sansad Television. I'll first begin with you, Urmi. And let's first start by understanding the basics here. Mission life or, lifestyle for environment, collective efforts we're talking about, sustainable lifestyles as well, sustainable and healthy lifestyle. But in a nutshell, if we have to understand it, what are the key components when we're talking about lifestyle for environment?
Well, very simply put, we have been talking much more in the public arena on climate change and what its impacts are. And we keep talking about, things that we need to do, as in move away from coal, move to renewable energy. We have been talking about that. But many of these things have very little meaning for individuals, so layperson. I mean, everybody is not going to set up a wind farm or a solar panel. I mean, solar panel you could, but basically it's not happening that way. But there are many things that each one of us can do, which we should be doing. Now, that is where this lifestyle for the environment comes in. So if you look at, the various documents of LiFE, Mission LiFE, and even what the Prime Minister says, there are certain examples that come in through about using public transport, about using cloth bags instead of plastic bags. And so, I mean, the Mission LiFE document has a whole list of things that you can do, which will be individual things that individuals can do, easy to do things in that sense. Yet there is a big problem. And the big problem is this: for any of these interventions to work, you need the right policies, which include pricing policies and the institutions. So basically, take public transport. I cannot tell people or expect that communities and individuals will take public transport if there is no reliable, accessible, affordable public transport. So that's where,
Take the case of plastic waste.
Similarly, it's in the case of plastic waste. Or I'll give you a different example. If you look at the figure for SUV sales in India, there's been about a 36% increase, year-on-year increase in the last fiscal, which basically means that sales of SUVs are zooming up. Now, SUVs, as we know, are at least 25% less efficient than standard cars. They have bigger wheels, so that basically means that even if you have an electric SUV, the wheel itself will create friction on the road, throw up road dust, and create secondary pollutants, right? So you have a problem there. But we're still seeing sales go up. Now, how do you ensure that this action is taken? You don't need a four-wheel SUV to get you from one place to another. You basically need a proper form of transport. How do I discourage people? That's where the government policy has to come in. Pricing policies. Basically, you might have an SUV on the road has to pay a higher tax or some other kind of disincentive. It's very nice to list all the things that people can do and people should do. That awareness that you too can contribute or you too have a responsibility to contribute for limiting emissions or tackling climate change is very important.
Okay.
But as the Prime Minister said very clearly, he used the word, it cannot be from conference rooms alone, which basically means there is an onus on conference rooms, on policymakers to do other kind of the supportive signals to make it possible.
Okay.
But to say that we as individuals have no responsibility is not that.
Is not true as well.
To sort of cap it up, very often, if the realization exists, we ourselves can, as human beings, as individuals, as communities, we become a pressure point.
Okay. So a collective effort, as the Prime Minister was talking about. But Dr. Mishra, when we're talking about a collective effort, all stakeholders will have to put their best foot forward. And Prime Minister was also referring to making it a mass movement. taking it from conference rooms to the dining tables as well. The conversation there, make it part of the daily life. But those components which Urmi was talking about, are those the only ones can we add more to it, because there are various aspects to it. Perhaps almost every single action of ours might be adding to the climate change in one way or the other, howsoever small that may be.
Look, first we have to see that this problem or today's social challenges, what we are seeing in the terms of climate change or environmental pollution, what is the origin of this one? If you see the Earth system, now if you see the evolutionary process like the geophysical evolution, then biophysical evolution, then our socio-culture evolution, and then socio-technical evolution, these are all are interconnected. And now if you see our today's problem, it is not from the one sector itself. It is coming from all the sectors, right? So now our solution should be like a integrated solution. So now if I see that our Prime Minister Modi's hit on this problem, they are talking about integrated approach which should be from bottom to top, where the top to bottom is there. Like when we are talking about the conferences, these approaches are from top to bottom. But how we can actually start the solution or giving solution to this problem from bottom to top. I will give you one example, how we can do this small behavioral changes. And I'm not going, it's still in our ecosystem. If you go to the village ecosystem, now you just go 10 or 12 years before in any villages, if you see any program, like any marriage program or anything, if you see that ecosystem marriage program, what they are using for the guests, they are actually taking chairs or the charpais from the villagers. Now they are using some clay pottery for the food. They are using some, for example, leaves, plates for that. And these all are biodegradable. Now, but if you see, today if you go to the same village, now they are following the model of the one city. They are taking the same thing, same plastics are there, same kind of foods are there. So what they are taking like it's a kind of consumerism, which we are actually producing from our, you can see that our advertisement and all these things. And they are taking it as this is the standard thing we have to do. So what Mr. Modi is trying to do it, now you start the charity from your home. If you want to change the world, you start charity from home. And why he is saying that you start it from your dinner table? Because you see, if you go to an household ecosystem, you have all the economic. For example, you talk about our mother. For example, I am talking about my childhood. My mother always buy one pant which is 2 inches or 3 inches longer than usual. And I used to keep for 2 and 3 years. And not only that one, that pant is also used by my younger brother. And then if you see, even after that one, these clothes are actually exchanged for some utensils. And this is the way of the sustainability at that time. But now we have a throw culture. And that's what we have to to stop from the household. That's why we need to take it from the
So problem of excess, concept of consumerism as well. All these combined together create a lot of problems, wherein the solution lies in bringing in those lifestyle changes we are talking about, not only from the point of view of what we eat or what we drink, but also how we live in various aspects. We'll come to those things also, but let me first bring in Minal here as well. Minal, thanks for joining us. The IPCC report, which has come out recently, also talks about the interdependence between the ecosystems, the climate, and the human societies also. So, what kind of interdependence are we looking at here, and various contours which can be further built upon to frame our responses to the problem of climate change?
Thank you. Yeah, it's never been in the history of humanity, I would say, that human and planetary health have come together the way they have. I think in the recent times, humans have modified the physical, chemical, and the biological system of the earth in unprecedented ways. Whether you talk about CO2 concentrations that cause climate change, you talk about our food systems, you talk about the extinction of species, and all of these, they have an impact on human health. We saw this in COVID, right? COVID was that wake up alarm, but unfortunately we've gone into the snooze mode again. So they're interdependent. Human health depends on the ecosystem. This disruption is resulting into all these disasters that we are seeing, the loss of livelihoods, the damage to infrastructure, and these also have costs, and the most vulnerable people are experiencing these the most. So if you want to reduce the impacts of climate change, of the present climate, but also of the future climate, then protecting our ecosystems is the key. But having said that, the IPCC report really emphasizes the importance of lifestyle and behavior change. And this has a huge potential, not just to reduce greenhouse gas emission, but also to improve people's health, like the example that Urmi Goswami gave of shifting to public transport that reduces air pollution. So even if it were not for climate change, many of these decisions would really help development. And now India is 1.4 billion people, and we have the opportunity to use this time in India's history to make a difference. And I really support this message of the Prime Minister to say that every person has a role, but yes, that role has to be supported, not just by the government, but also, I would add, that by the private sector.
Okay. But Mrinal, what are those systems which we can go back to when we're talking about those changes in the lifestyle here?
So the report, if I talk about what the IPCC report says, it identifies about 60 individual actions, and they range across sectors from buildings to the way we plan and build our cities. For example, if I give you the example of buildings, then just using less floor space, like building smaller houses. And of course, this is not general, right? It doesn't apply to everybody, but also, for example, talking about overconsumption. And the report, for the first time, an IPCC report, calls to overconsumption, or status consumption, as we call it, of the high-income households who can be change makers to make a difference, to reduce consumption. We change our food systems. Our food now comes from miles and miles away. The consumption of water, and the report lists down even simple acts like changing the thermostat, the set points of our air conditioners, could make a difference to energy savings. So like you highlighted at the beginning of the program, that it's not just the supply side or the technological changes. The government is doing its job, but as individuals, there is a lot more to be done. We cannot keep building power plants to service the energy and material demands of the country. So they are interdependent, government actions and citizen actions.
Okay. We'll go further deeper into that aspect of, how both the government actions and the individual actions can complement each other. But Pawan Mulukutla is also with us. Pawan, electric mobility, sustainable cities, these are larger concepts, but then they are also, looks like, very integral part of these lifestyle changes which we're talking about. Urmi referred to it, Mrinal also referred to it in terms of availability of public transport systems. So how do we look at, these crucial aspects also, making cities sustainable, thereby in turn, complementing the efforts of the individuals in making their own life sustainable?
Thank you. I think we are at a very pivotal point in the transition of how the growth will be, right? And as we know that we actually have a lot more demand for energy and consumption that's going to come. And LiFE is actually one such initiative which is really talking about, there should be enough for everyone's needs, but not for everyone's greed. Looking from that perspective, I think this is for the first time the Prime Minister Modi actually has set at the global platform the need for a behavioral change, because this has been talked about. And it really comes down to a collective action, but also individual action set by certain government policy frameworks. Now, in addition to transport, I think public transport has been talked about. You have walking, you have cycling in cities, and given the kind of urban migration that we are going to see, this becomes very extremely essential part of how our cities evolve, how actually we develop our cities and ensure that it is not only safe and accessible, but it is also sustainable.
Okay.
In addition, I would also suggest certain other measures, reducing the long haul flights, increasing plant-based diets, In addition, we are also talking about, the Prime Minister literally said the conversation should begin at the dining table, which is also about reducing food waste, because this is one of the biggest challenges that we really talk about. And also, how do we ensure increased food securities? I think even by these simple actions across the globe, and in developed nations, if we are able to bring this change, we can actually really reduce GHG emissions by almost 40 to 70%. I think there's a very clear scientific evidence that behavioral change and an approach like LiFE can become a huge champion for shift in the way we look at our own lives. So I think these measures are very much doable. There needs to be policy framework in place, and it really needs to become starting with awareness. I think it need not be only just in our offices and in government spaces and in private sector, but even starting at school, because I think this whole thinking around how we consume has to start right from childhood. The way we actually, it shapes our thinking. And this is actually one of the greatest opportunity we are seeing. But how do we really make this happen? I think there is a lot of responsibility to move towards putting huge investments, and therefore through India's G20 presidency, this is actually an opportunity where we can push for huge investments towards.
Pawan, we'll come to that part as well. That's a very important aspect which you are putting in place in terms of how we make that happen. The investment, the money, where it has to come from, the way it has to be spent as well. But since you mentioned about children, you mentioned about school, you mentioned about the basis of it all as well. Let me bring Mr. Anil Kumar here also, and then I'll come back to you. Mr. Kumar, when we're talking about the taking the conversation from the conference rooms or the studios to the dining table, one very important stakeholder at the dining table are children. And when we talk about children being part of this entire mass movement of bringing in these lifestyle changes, how do you see that happening? Are we moving on the right path, or there is a lot which needs to be done on this aspect?
Good evening, Vishal, and good evening, everybody on the panel. Honestly speaking, Vishal, what you're saying is absolutely essential, because foundation of any society whatsoever, whosoever, how developed or underdeveloped, the basis lies only at school. What we are, what we portray, and where we reach finally is the ultimate way of looking at the action happening at school level. That means children. Now, having said that, I'm taking up an important aspect of interdependence. I was actually looking at one of the very beautiful scientific videos that why don't we have solar panels all across the Sahara? And the outcome of that is that if we plant solar panels there, the Amazon forest will deplete with a very rapid speed. That means what we do and how it is honestly connected to where it finally going to lead makes a lot of difference. Having said this, there are some fundamentals which are there in the school system and in the country's way of looking at things and its perspective. Like, for example, the schools as of today, if I were to say in the urban areas, are starting sometime around 8:30, which is not a very good time to start a school during summer. So you save a lot of energy if you start early. Our school at Faridabad, we begin sharp at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I always propose to make it even 6:30, because the sunrise during summers will go to 5:30 in the morning. And from there, we can save a lot of energy. Having said this, when we are there in an absolutely high zone of temperature, at that point in time, we are asking for air conditioning. So it is, in a way, what we need to do at our routine levels of day-to-day functioning that we can bring in. Then early to bed and early to rise used to be a fantastic concept in our early childhood days. Now, if you ask children to get up and to be in the school at 7 o'clock, I'll say most parents will say, oh, it's too early. Without realizing the fact, the consequential impact of this is huge. Imagine, the West is already doing it in some sense, because they're from March to September, a 1 hour, 1.5 hours gap is there because of looking at what time the sun comes and what time the sun goes down. On the basis of that, the West is doing it after what India has taught, and we are not actually replicating it, what we basically know our own selves.
Okay.
Imagine if we go back to an early schedule, the major part of the air conditioning is absolutely gone. When the children are back to their homes, they can be confined in a limited space and can occupy themselves in a much better manner.
Okay. So those are energy saving measures which you are talking about, referring to, Mr. Kumar, as well. We'll come to other aspects related to students also, children. How do we educate them? How do we make them aware of issues related to environment, climate change also, and various other aspects of the lifestyle for environment. But we'll take a short break here. Stay tuned. We'll come back in a short while. Welcome back. We're talking about lifestyle changes for tackling climate change, and there are various aspects to it. Most of them we know already, perhaps have heard it from our parents or grandparents as well, have seen that happening in our surrounding areas also. But the idea is to adopt them in a much more larger way, in a much more effective way as well. Urmi, when we're talking about these issues, and for example, the Prime Minister was also referring to the IPCC report also lists them, even Mission LiFE statement also talks about saving energy, saving water, going in for millets also, making local bodies more environment friendly. Transport is one aspect which we already looked at, but these interrelated aspects. And when we're talking about juxtaposing, as you were referring earlier, in terms of what has to be done by the individual and that being complementary to what is to be done by the government in terms of the policies. How do we bring that, the complementariness?
Well, awareness, very important. But to put it very simply, the situation where we are now in terms of the environmental crisis, which is actually a triple environmental crisis. We more often than not talk about climate change, but you have climate change, you have biodiversity loss and pollution. These are three crises, the environmental crisis, the triple crisis that the world is facing. When you're in this era, you basically have to throw the kitchen sink. There is no part of society that can sit back and say, I don't have to do it. Now, you mentioned complementarity. There is in a lot of cases, what happens is that you need to create that demand, that push. So, if I go back to something like water, saving water, you need to we need to have that culture at home as well as policy. What is that policy? That policy is to ensure that you don't give out signals like free electricity so that you actually pump out all the water. Now, if you don't have that and you have again a culture at home which tells you have to turn off the tap, use water more wisely, reuse water, ensure rainwater harvesting, then what you have is is basically the two streams come together of policy and of individual behavior.
Okay.
But there is one more stream of activity which actually is purely individual, and that I think pushing that requires not constant awareness. So it's like messaging. It's like an ad. I don't know who meant. Oh, sorry. After the Prime Minister spoke, there was a little discussion because it's part of the World Bank Spring meeting, and Nirmala Sitharaman spoke about, Finance Minister, she spoke about advertising, the way advertising keeps, repeating certain messages. And I think it should work that way, is where you tell people constantly in repetitive ways till it becomes a habit, So that's the educative version of doing things. Consider this, we see in our country a large number of stray animals on the road. We also see a culture of feeding these animals. Now, it is great that you have a culture that is aware of other life forms. But yet, we need to understand how our behavior is impacting other life forms. So, take an example of pigeons. The fact that we feed pigeons has made the pigeon the dominant bird, which has driven out other birds out of the ecosystem. So, we are actually pushing biodiversity loss. I think that's something Meenal raised about ecosystem loss. Now, those are activities again, which are purely within our realm, individuals' realm. And
Okay.
you'll find it there in life as well, about what kind of activities we do. Ultimately, what is Mission Life? Mission Life is something that has been present in as part of the sort of the broader policy, global policy as well, whether it's the SDGs or climate or the climate discussions. It is about responsible consumption and production. How do you produce
Okay.
and consume in a manner that produces less waste, use our resources better? Mission Life is a layman's entry into that conversation.
That conversation, and ensuring, that layman becomes the most important stakeholder here as well.
And pushes the
and then
conversation.
pushes the conversation further. You spoke about what Mrinal was saying. Mrinal, I'd like to bring you in here in terms of the complementarity aspect which Urmi was referring to. And when we're talking about how it has to be brought into practice, the interdependence of climate or ecosystems, biodiversity with human societies is something which the IPCC report also talks about. But then how do we make that into a sort of a mass movement here, bring that onus on the citizens or individuals as an important stakeholder of this entire process?
So of course, awareness is the first thing, and we all know that. So we'll take that as a given. But let me give you the example of waste. Like the government has a great policy. For example, in a city, there's a great waste management system. We want to move away from the landfill. We have got a methanation plant. We've got a composting plant. But if people don't segregate waste at home, all of that would not work.
Indeed.
Right? So one of the things that we need to do, and I think Urmi did touch upon this, is in addition to awareness, you need incentives and disincentives. What is my motivation to change my behavior? How do we motivate people? And one of the things is just highlight what savings people get. And I come to energy saving, right? But a lot of times people are not aware of these benefits. That also the benefits come in the long term, but the cost has to be borne in the immediate time frame. So there the government can support, for example, through subsidies, and that's how the big solar success happened, right? And that's how EV will happen. You can have an EV target, but you also need to modify building codes or urban plans to set up or infrastructure for EV or charging systems. So it's not, behavior change cannot happen on its own, but if people are incentivized, if people are made aware, and if there is a disincentive for unsustainable consumption. For example, if somehow building codes could discourage high energy consuming buildings, then you can achieve more success with the same policy.
Okay.
And I keep bringing the building thing in because our building codes in India are not very ambitious. If you look at the state level building codes and the city approval plans, see, we have to remember one thing: when you put a building in place, it's going to, or a pipeline or a power plant or a road, you are locking in people's lifestyle into that type of consumption. It's going to sit there for 50, 60, 70 years. And it's hard to unlock us out into a more sustainable. So the problem that US and some other countries are having is that they're locked into a high carbon, high emission, high consumption lifestyle. But we still are at a point where it's possible in some parts of India, some states, many cities, to get into more positive lock-ins where we modify infrastructure. So we build new infrastructures so that people can live a sustainable life. And maybe you can talk about mangroves. Just protecting mangroves in the coastal areas can lead to livelihoods. It can store carbon. It can, of course, provide mitigation, but also adaptation to extremes. So there are many examples that you could have for different sectors.
Okay. So interdependence is going to work both ways here as well. Dr. Mishra, when we're talking about this aspect of making people aware, and as both Urmi and Mrinal were referring to, that process of incentivizing and disincentivizing as well, for dissuading people from taking those actions which are harmful for the climate as well. That process will have to be followed more aggressively. We have some examples here. For example, the electric mobility part, if you look at electric vehicle policy, does have some incentives for the people to go ahead and opt for EVs. The infrastructure is being put in place. But then the complementarity will have to work hand in glove now. It can't be just left to the governments.
You are right. Actually, if you see the problem of climate change, you see the consumption, what we are consuming, actually we are emitting something, right? and why this is like from the point of the government, why they are incentivizing. For example, if you take the example of some hilly areas like the Himachal Pradesh, if you take the apple production, now if you see in the last 20 years, like because of the climate change, the altitude of the climate, like the apple horticulture is shifting. They are going to the upper limit. And also, if you see the use of some smart water technology, now the government is incentive, like they are giving some money to the farmers for applying these drip irrigation. But at the same time, when we do the study in those locations, the farmers are not like they are not aware of this climate change. They are not thinking about like what can be done to save some water, how can they change
So
their
the awareness mechanism.
awareness mechanism. So we have to put this awareness mechanism. And also, if you take why we are discussing here, like why this topic should go to the dining table, because you see, if you take one household, in a household we have an economist, we have a waste manager, and if you take the problem at that table, and you will get the solution, all that, like the Urmi was, like the Urmi and the Mrinal was saying. For example, waste, like the food waste. Now you know the food waste is a very big problem for us. If you go to the Western countries, they are emitting lots of methane, which is a greenhouse gas. But if you are going to tackle this problem at house level, now you are actually giving the like the manure, like you are giving the composting for the, so like this is the example of kitchen garden.
Okay.
And the household can do it. We have a good example of Indore, where you can see both the top to bottom approach and bottom to top approach. They are acting hand in hand.
Okay.
Because if you see all the waste management process in the Indore, it's beautiful.
So integrated approach.
Integrated approach.
Oh, okay,
So
okay,
that's-
okay. Anilji, I'd like to bring you in here. You know, you were earlier talking about how schools or institutions like schools can also contribute as well. But going back to that basic unit, that is children or the students there as well, how to motivate them, how to make them aware, how to make them learn the importance of bringing in these lifestyle changes, because we've seen it during the Swachh Bharat mission as well, that ultimately, you know, it was children or the students who became the flag bearers of the entire mass movement there, you know, educating their parents, educating their neighbors in the society as well. So how can we come to that same approach, adopt that same approach? That's one. And perhaps when we're talking about curriculum as well, learning more about environment and climate change.
I completely agree with you, Vishal. And for that, I can quote examples for what we have been doing in the school. We have a society called Sevam, which is being formed by children. Along with the children, year on year, we are running now 9th year of the society. And you won't believe, in the nearby area, when the smart city, Faridabad was declared in the category of smart city, these children picked up a particular task and decided that they will create a green zone in the heart of the city, which was like a dump yard. And you won't believe that these children achieved it in 3 years. And now it's a absolutely lush green, lots of birds, lots of ecosystem, other animals are joining in, right near about 2 kilometers away from the school. Going to Aravali, which is very close to us. It's like about 5 kilometers from the school, the Aravali range begins. Imagine the children actually, when we just educated them about all these issues of sustainable development and the goals which have been talked about, when we associate children directly to this, you won't believe children cried alongside having tree trunk around. And they said, no, we will make sure that they stay for us and for the future. Having said this, so we need to strike some balance somewhere between what we really need and what is actually the greed.
Okay.
So these children, I'm sure they are great messengers. I talked about Sevam. I talked about Aravali's, I'll say, restoration. They are the plan of 2030, which the government has brought for the Aravalis.
Okay.
The children are saying that we will not allow this to happen because the ecosystem and the biodiversity which we talk about around us will be shattered.
Okay.
And imagine that makes a difference. And
Okay.
that makes a difference in the lifestyles of all the children. We are a unit of about 4,500 odd kids in our school,
Okay.
tentatively. And all these children, when they went to the Aravalis, They came back and educated the rest of the children alongside.
Okay, so what you're saying, Mr. Anil, is that that practical approach vis-a-vis students, vis-a-vis children as well, making them do something to try and understand the impact of their efforts there as well. Pawanji, this issue of complementarity of actions to be taken by individuals and actions to be taken by the government or the other stakeholders as well. How have you seen that happening in other aspects like electric mobility or sustainable cities also? Or perhaps, there's something lacking which we need to focus on?
I think four things very clearly, right? One is ambitions. For example, they came up with this 50,000 electric buses as the National Electric Bus Program, right? I think that's a fantastic thing that Government of India has announced, and we already have 4,000 electric buses running in India. So I think raising ambitions becomes one of the first things. Second is, how do we actually kind of gamify some of this? Use technology. We are talking about a completely new generation. Just touching upon what Meenal was saying, how do you use incentives and disincentives? And can we use technology to gamify some of this? Because I think it will become more attractive for people to start participating, and they will really, it will actually result in a big behavior change, and we have seen that happen. The third would be, can we actually use a big shift in materials, like the way we look at buildings? What kind of construction technologies are we looking at? So there are those material sciences also, which would become extremely very important on achieving this in our cities. And fourth, there are a lot of examples, these best practices that we have heard over the last couple of minutes. How do we really ensure that we are able to scale this up, and how do we ensure that we are able to exchange this kind of wealth of knowledge that is already available from best practices and pilots, creating a platform for students, for office goers, for officials? I think bringing all this together can really go a long way. I would really say these four measures can really bring about a big change in the way we look at this whole shift in behaviors.
Okay. Mrinal, do you agree that, and most importantly, bringing in the aspect of use of technology here, and by technology, there are various aspects of technology which can be brought into application to further push the steps which need to be taken by the individual stakeholders here?
Absolutely, and I think technology is something we have demonstrated to the world through our direct benefit transfer scheme. And I think the whole digital infrastructure that India is creating is a big example. And I think we can use this now across various sectors. Moving to water, we have already moved to agriculture to test the health of the soils and various parameters, to mobility. So I think if we are talking about transformation at a scale, it is solely possible, of course, with policy and finance support, but technology can really bring that shift through innovation.
Okay. Mrinal, your views on these aspects there? Best way to move forward? Mrinal, you'll have to unmute yourself, please.
Sorry, I wanted to say that we just need to somehow find ways to make sustainability cool and probably have some, I don't know, media engagement. And this is a great way, right? You have a prime time show focusing on sustainability. The Prime Minister goes and talks about lifestyle changes. So we are all moving in the right direction. My university now grows vegetables. But it's really now that, unfortunately, we are at a stage where incremental actions won't help. And we just need actions at a very massive scale. And so everybody needs, so like Urmi was also saying, but quoting the famous Hollywood movie, that we need everything everywhere all at once. And therefore, the time for pick and choose is gone, and we need to work across sectors with, and I want to, at the risk of repeating myself, I want to bring the private sector in, because one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals is responsible production and consumption. And it is that I do feel that the private sector is sort of getting away if we fix the responsibility only on the government and individuals. Individuals can make choices if those choices are offered, and those choices come from the private sector. And therefore, I think there is a very important role of companies in transforming a society from a throwaway to a more sustainable society. And that goes from all the retail outlets to industrial manufacturing. How do we make products that people can use for longer, more long-lived, repairable products, so that we don't have to throw them frequently?
Okay. Okay. Two very interesting things which have been said by Mrinal here. I'd like to bring to you one which is already mentioned twice in her responses. You also refer to that. That is the role of the private sector. And, as Dr. Mishra was also talking about, advertising, we buy what we see, or in terms of, we tend to get attracted to what we see time and again. That's one. The culture of consumerism, or limiting ourselves is what is the need of the hour. So how do we bring in this third player significantly into the fold? Government is one, individuals are other, but the private industry, private sector is also as equally important.
So the industry or the private sector is actually taking cues from individuals, that is, who are part of the consuming group, and from government. So how you send cues to the private sector is through, one is from government policy, which sets the disincentives and incentives, or policy framework. So that gives a general sort of outline. I mean, consider this. I mean, 5 years ago, even like 6-7 years ago, you didn't have private sector, so many private sector companies talking about the carbon footprint, sustainability, because now they're getting signals from virtually every government on the planet. They're all behaving, whether they're behaving or not, but they're talking, right? So that's a kind of governmental cues.
Okay. So at least the government and the individuals have set them talking.
Individuals are what do we send our cues with? We send our cues with our behavior as well, with demands. Now, the problem is also that it's when the individual.
So it's a two-way process, you say?
Yeah, it's a two-way process, because for the individual also, if there are not sustainable products on the market, then what am I choosing between one unsustainable and another? But basically, when there is a choice, if as consumers choose as individual consumers, we choose with those factors in mind, then we actually send a signal out.
For example, MNCs, the food companies now coming up with, they're experimenting with millets as well.
Right. Or look at the way packaging is changing because of governmental cues and a larger awareness on plastics. But there is one thing I really want to emphasize, and we have spoken a lot on the complementarity and the need for government policies, private sector behavior, and individuals to align, because a lot of the issues on Mission LiFE require support from one or the other. But there is within Mission LiFE a lot of activity that is actually centered on individuals. And I think a core part of the Prime Minister's sort of message is really that there is a lot we can do as individuals, that perhaps the policies are already there. Like, think about one policy that I can think about very clearly is Swachh Bharat. Now, we talk in terms about the kind of mission mode that we have had on Swachh Bharat. We heard the principal from the school in Faridabad talk about the fervor with which students behaved. But the fact of the matter is, today, if you're driving around in Delhi or the NCR region, there's still, actually, Swachhata still seems a far cry away. It is clear that the policy is there, the messaging is there, but as individuals, we are still not succeeding. Why are we not succeeding? Because we are not segregating waste at home. We are somehow seem to think about the world in only messaging terms. So we still litter, we still create dirt.
So that inertia will have to be broken.
So basically, this is a good case where you have the policies in place, the signaling in place, but individual action has to step up.
Okay.
So I think when the Prime Minister talks about it shouldn't be just a conference room alone, but also dining table. It's a two-way process there also.
Okay. One more thing, which Mrinal was saying, and since, this is complementary to what we're talking about in terms of the culture of consumerism, the role of the private industry as well, with the, youngsters taking the lead, and students or children, as we were discussing with, Mr. Anil as well. Mrinal said a very interesting sentence, that let's make it cool.
Yes.
Awareness campaigns, making it cool, make the younger generation more involved.
True. One of the core elements of the sustainable consumption and production, the SDG Mrinal was referring to, and which is at the heart. What is Mission LiFE? Mission LiFE is about sustainable consumption and production. Includes recycling, reuse, and longer use, repair. Now, if we make it cool, in the sense you have messages either through incentives or through getting personalities involved, saying that it is not a bad thing that you reuse things, or you use it for longer. You don't have to have the latest phone, but you can use an older phone for longer. That is cool.
That is
That
cool.
has to come. These are all part of narratives, but we all, as I said, we have to throw the kitchen sink. There is nobody you can leave out in this.
Okay, nobody you can leave out, and putting the best foot forward, making all efforts, integrated approach there as well. Thank you so much, Urmi, Dr. Mishra as well for joining us. Mrinal, Pawan and Mr. Anil Kumar also for sharing your views and insight with us and our viewers. So there it is, all about, the issues of climate change and life, as we're talking about, lifestyle for environment, bringing in those lifestyle changes, being the agent of change, moving the individuals forward now. And as our panelists are pointing out, time is now to act for all of us individually, as a society, as a nation, as an entire global community also, to tackle the issues of climate change. We will have to put our best foot forward and move on with the integrated approach here. We'll come back again on Monday with a different topic. Till then, keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.